Today we're going to take a look at how to tell if your commercial vehicle shocks are worn. There are 5 ways to do this. Number 1, is the shock leaking oil? Number 2, is there end mount damage? Number 3, is there wear on the air spring? Number 4, are your tires showing signs of cupping? And number 5, is the shock damaged internally? Let's go into more detail. It is normal to see a light misting of oil on a working shock absorber. This is what we call misting. As the temperature of a working shock increases, an ultra-fine amount of shock fluid adheres to the piston rod as it is pulled past the oil seal on the extension stroke. On the compression stroke, a small amount of the hot shock fluid evaporates off the piston rod. The evaporated fluid condenses and forms a film, or mist, on the outside of the shock body. Over time, the accumulated misting appears as an even layer of grimy film on the outside of the shock. Misting is normal, and it shows that the shock is working as it should. However, a leaking shock means that something is wrong with the shock and that the oil seal could be compromised. A leaking shock will show random streaks of fluid down the body of the shock. This is best observed when the shock is fully extended. Remember this saying, if it's streaking, it's leaking. Next, is there end mount damage? Another way to tell if you have a worn shock is that you will see damage to the end mounts. Here is the most common damage that can occur. The bushing, which is the rubber around the steel sleeve, could be worn out and damaged. The eye-ring itself could become elongated or even damaged and possibly torn off. Another thing to look for is more than normal and excessive wear to your air springs. Next, are your tires cupping? Damaged tires that show signs of cupping indicate that you may need to replace your shocks. A worn shock can continue to cause tire cupping on newly replaced tires. The final way to check if your shocks are worn is to check for internal damage. Internal damage is impossible to examine with your eye, but the Gabriel heat test is the best way to diagnose it. Since shocks generate heat when working, the shock body should be slightly warm to hot after normal use. By comparing the temperature of the shocks and the frame rail, you get an idea of the working condition of the shock. To begin the Gabriel heat test, drive the vehicle for at least 15 minutes. Then, within 5 minutes after stopping the vehicle, establish a reference temperature of the chassis with an infrared thermometer gun. Next, check the temperature of the shock absorber, about 1 inch from the bottom cap. Do not touch the shock absorber, as it may be hot and could cause a burn injury. A working shock absorber should be warmer than the chassis. Suspect failure in any shock absorber that is noticeably cooler than its mate on the other end of the axle. Remember this saying, if it's cold, it's old. If your vehicle is being serviced, we recommend this heat test as the first step. It should be performed about once a month, but more frequently on high-mileage vehicles. Thanks for joining us today. If you have technical questions, please call us toll-free at 800-999-3903.